Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the inner workings of the creative process. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. My guest this week is Madeleine Holly-Rosing, creator of the Boston Metaphysical Society series. Since beginning that series, Madeleine has created graphic novels, short stories, a coloring book, and is currently working on an audio drama. Oh, and she's run 9 Kickstarters and has literally written the book on the subject, Kickstarter for the Independent Creator. We talk about Kickstarter, check the show notes for info on her latest, the intersection between screenwriting and graphic novels, working with collaborators for those graphic novels, and how much more diverse creators and fans are than many people realize, and leaving room to be surprised in your creative work, and much more. Here's my conversation with Madeleine Holly-Rosing. Welcome to the podcast, Madeleine. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So
I'm curious to know how you got your creative start. Were you a kid? Were you a little older?
I was a kid and was bored pretty easily. And I remember as a preteen, I don't even know when it started, but it would always take me a long time to get to sleep. So I'd essentially tell myself a story. And I think that's where it all started, because it's just the whole imagination. And, I love to read. I think one of the first books my mother read to me was A Wrinkle in Time.
I love that book.
Yeah. And, my brother was a big sci-fi fan, which, clearly in my formative days had an influence. And then I just expanded out exponentially from that. But yeah, I think it's just because I would entertain myself by telling myself stories. And of course, I was always the hero because,
Obviously,
yes, of course. How could you not be the hero of your own story?
Right. It's the only way to guarantee that you're the hero, right?
Absolutely.
Is anybody else going to make you the hero of their book?
No.
Yeah. So your brother was older?
Yeah. He's about 6-7 years older than I am. So, that's actually a bigger gap than most people realize. So like when I was, a preteen, he was on his way to college. So yeah.
Was he kind of handing down his favorite stuff to you, or?
No, I mean, it was just around. So I was just influenced by it, but I was always a big reader growing up. So, I would see his, Edgar Rice Burroughs covers and stuff that he just had around. And he was a big Frazetta fan for the art. And I just always loved those stories. And luckily for me, growing up, my local library would have the summer reading things where you would read X amount of books and you'd get a sticker or, something silly like that. And, my mom was all for that. So I just would go through rows of fantasy and science fiction books. So clearly I'm a genre writer. I've written other things, outside of that, particularly when I was, I have an MFA in screenwriting from UCLA. And while I was there, I did a lot of things that were, action adventure that were outside of genre. And until I realized, this is where my heart is and my home is. So let's just start, world building and doing it my way. So it ended up being a lot more fun.
That sounds fantastic. And I want to get back to the MFA, but before we do, when did you start actually putting words on a page rather than just telling them to yourself at night? When did you start taking writing as a serious thing?
I guess that's kind of hard to answer because I would always write stories in school and the teachers would tell my parents like, she's gifted, right? And of course they were very enthusiastic about it because like, of course she's gifted. She's my child, kind of attitude. but not really understanding or encouraging writing as a career, because I don't think to them writing was a career. It was something that somebody else did. Mm-hmm. And in fact, my early career aspirations didn't have anything to do with writing. And which is a shame, because I think I could have gotten better faster. Mm-hmm. If it had been, I'd been more focused at an earlier age. Because at some point, I think I had been writing stories, through my teenage years. And then I stopped because to me, they felt they were immature. Mm-hmm. And because I was immature, I was like 15 years old. So yeah, I decided that I wasn't going to write again until I had some life experience. And so when I was in my 20s, I think I'd finished graduate school and had a full-time job in New York at the time, and was writing and taking extension courses in screenwriting, and doing, and just writing on the weekends and on my lunch hours. And that's when it all started to really gel, I think. And I had some very, very good instructors. It was through NYU, mm-hmm. And, just learning the craft, and that this was something I really wanted to do. But, it's, as everyone knows, when you have a full-time job, writing on the side is difficult. And I was also a competitive athlete at the same time and traveling. So yeah, when I mentioned on your little form of like, what are your challenges? Like time management is a huge, huge thing. I mean, even now when I'm not, competing or anything, I've been retired for years. But yeah, time management is always a thing.
Have you found anything that works really well for you with that?
Sometimes I'm very good about, okay, for an hour, I'm going to just do the admin stuff for the business, and then I'm going to go write. And when I'm not doing a lot of traveling, that works out really well. When I'm traveling, not so much. And with, the pandemic, and now we're kind of heading into a mini con season that's being condensed into 3 months. Literally starting on August 27th, I'm literally gone for 3 weeks, because I'll be going from San Jose, then to Boston, and then my husband and I are going up to Portland for Rose City. And that takes we drive. So it takes 2 days to get up, 2 days to get down. You got 3 days there. Week is gone. Yeah. So yeah, wow. I'm always amazed that I get anything done, but I think it's just because I just do a little bit every day, and I just keep chipping away at it, and it all manages to get done.
And, I'm glad that you said that, because I feel like so many people think that in order to accomplish anything, they need, a solid day or a week, or at least like 3 days or whatever. And that if they're only going to do 5 minutes, half an hour, whatever, that isn't good, that it doesn't count, that it will never get anything done. But it so obviously can. And in so many cases, it's so much better to take the 5 minutes you have than to wait around for the day or the weekend or the week off or the month off that is probably not really going to come as quickly as you want it to.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm basically, by the afternoon, after I've gotten all the morning stuff done, that's when I work. And I'm usually pretty good about that. But I mean, right now things are kind of nutso, because I'm heading out. I'm producing an audio drama, and which, most all the recording is done. I have a terrific audio director. So, I'm listening to stuff as he sends it in. A lot of the heavy lifting is already done for that. but then starts the heavy lifting for the Kickstarter, which is in October. So yeah, it's kind of nutso. But sometimes I just say like, hey, I got to go do something fun here. I got to push aside all the other administrative stuff that needs to be done, and I just want to go work on the story. And so I'll just go do that, and I'll just say, screw it.
Yeah, well, you have to, or you'll just burn yourself out on the administrative stuff and never get to the creative stuff that fuels you. And that's just a self-defeating cycle.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because I could actually probably use some staff right now, but who can afford staff? And often is the case that it takes as long as it takes to explain to someone that something needs to be done, you could have already done it. Mm-hmm. There are a few exceptions, and I do utilize that more. I do contract out more stuff now because I don't have time to do it. Who do I have, fortunately enough, I have enough contacts out there that it's like, okay, I need to get XYZ done. Who do I know? Let me send them a message, see if they have time. And usually, they say like, yeah, I can, if it's not a rush, I'll go like, yeah, sure. And then it gets done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
We all use staff. Lovely. Oh, it would be so lovely.
Yes.
So let's go back to your MFA, because you said MFA in screenwriting.
Correct.
And you were writing genre. And I'm particularly curious about that because I know for fiction writers in particular, there tends to be a stigma in MFA programs about writing genre, which fortunately did not exist at Goddard, which is good because, to my surprise, at least as much as anyone else's, I ended up writing a YA fantasy novel that I never saw coming. But I don't know if that stigma exists in screenwriting as much. I did both. I wrote genre and non-genre, but I didn't really feel like there was any stigma at all. I had one professor who was absolutely intrigued that I could write genre because it just wasn't where his head was at. Mm-hmm. And he actually ended up helping me shop that script around because he goes, I can't write that, but I can help produce that. Oh, that's awesome.
As most things, it, didn't go anywhere in the long run. But, you learn a lot from it. And you also learn that the stigma of, women can't write action is still alive and well.
Yeah.
Because literally, I this producer, he said, we're sitting down in a meeting together and he's looking at the script and he's going like, wow, that's a great action sequence. This is great. Wait a minute. Who wrote this? And he goes, it was a woman. Yeah. Literally he was saying this to my face.
Nice.
Yeah. And he's going like, this is great. This is great. Because it's like, of course women can write a lot. Anyway, that's a whole other, topic. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of the whole, women can't write comedy.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
Gee, you're right. I'm so sorry. The humor switch was never turned on in my poor little female brain. Poor deprived me. Give me a break.
Yeah, it's I write so much obviously in Boston Metaphysical because that's what my career is built on. I've been fortunate in that I have been asked to be part of other people's anthologies and play in their sandbox and their IP with their characters, which is a lot of fun. And because it's wonderful to be able to write a comic script and then hand it to someone else. Say, here, you produce it. Bye-bye. Thank you. I'll do whatever editing you want, but here, you produce it. But that's when I often take the opportunity to exercise my comedic chops. And that's always a lot of fun. And it's also a nice break from Boston Metaphysical, because I can exercise different parts of my brain, and which is always refreshing. There's another story, of course, I can't talk about it yet, that I'm doing for another IP that I can't wait till I can announce it, but I can't yet. But that's another thing where I get to play in somebody else's sandbox, and it's just so refreshing and nice to be working in another world.
Yeah. Just for listeners who aren't familiar with the term IP,
intellectual property. Yeah. It's not fan fiction, which is actually playing in somebody else's IP in Sandbox. But this is actually getting paid for writing in somebody else's, intellectual property.
I never thought about the whole anthology thing that way, but it's like a little break from your own world. Try somebody else's on for size and see what happens. Do you ever, when you do a project like that, do you come back to your own work with new ideas?
Yeah. Or sometimes it gives me a different sense of how to structure, which is really nice, or just a different approach to my own work, which is actually happening right now. Excuse me, my allergies. I'm currently outlining the next Boston Metaphysical graphic novel, and which I think is going to be 3 issues, but I may do all 3 issues in once and just have one graphic novel. But the project that I'm working on, which cannot be named, because of the process that I'm doing with them, is helping me look at this graphic novel structurally a little differently. And that's been very, very helpful. I'll take improvement wherever I can get it. If I can learn something from somebody else, I'll take it, because, hey, there's always room for improvement.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, since you started with screenwriting, or you got your MFA in screenwriting at least, and you do graphic novels, I know that unused scripts can make great fodder for graphic novels. And I'm wondering if that connection exists for you, or if this was a completely different process.
It definitely exists. Boston Metaphysical was originally a TV pilot that I wrote in the MFA program. And I actually wrote 2 episodes. I wrote the pilot and also another episode, which, what did the instructor call it? It's like the 5th episode in the series, because if you can write episode number 5, that means your series has legs.
Okay.
So I actually used the basis for episode number 5 for the audio drama, and I adapted that into the audio drama. But the pilot I adapted into the original 6-issue miniseries. And for those of your listeners who are not familiar with the series, it's about an ex-Pinkerton detective, a spirit photographer, and a genius scientist who battle supernatural forces in late 1800s Boston. And I actually went back to school to learn how to write sequential art, otherwise known as comics, because it is different than screenwriting. I think knowing how to write a screenplay is very helpful to moving over to graphic novels, because they're both visual writing, but the pacing is different. You have to think about paneling, and you can actually direct, which you can't do in a regular script, particularly a spec script. I look at a graphic novel script as a communication document to my artist, my letterer, and possibly pre-press, because these are the people that are, and the colorist, of course. It's a document that has to serve all of these people. So you are writing not only descriptions, but like notes for your letterer, notes to your colorist if you want something in particular. In the sequels, because we have the original 6-issue miniseries, which was drawn by Emily Hugh, and then the 4 sequels were drawn and colored by Gwen Tavares. And both those women operated a little differently. Emily didn't do the coloring, but Emily, both incredibly talented women and artists. You can designate the paneling of how, or if you want like insets, I mean, you can be very, very detailed, but depending on the artist, sometimes you just gotta let them go and not micromanage them, but give them sort of like, okay, this is the template. And occasionally Emily would blow up my paneling, and she was so sweet. She goes, I hope you don't mind, but I thought I'd do this. And then she'd show it to me like, this is brilliant. Just keep it. I'll work around it. Don't worry about it. And Gwen pretty much keeps on script, which is fine. But then she adds her own different flares to it, which is great. But yeah, it really depends on the artist. And if you're working, say, like a work for hire, it could be in the work for hire, the artist is the one with the power in the room. So you're going to write the script and they're going to do whatever the hell they want. And that's fine too. So you just kind of have to go with it depending on who's writing the checks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you went there, because I was going to ask you how it is to balance, because you do want the other people to have some creative input too, even
Absolutely.
though you have a vision.
But I make it clear, Gwen, let's see, well, Emily was with us for the original first 6 issues. And Gwen's been with me now for 3 years, three and a half years. She just finished the Book of Demons, which is with the letterer right now. And the first thing I tell my artists is say, I'm going to send you a script, but if you have a better idea, if you have an inspiration, just tell me, communicate it to me, because I am probably going to go like, yeah, let's do that. And that's happened a few times. Like with Emily, with our final, the cover for the trade. I was, had a conversation back and forth about what I wanted on the cover. And she's like, no, that's going to be too much. This is what I suggest. And I said, okay, let's do it your way. There wasn't any fight. It was like, oh yeah, she's right. Yeah.
I feel like it's one of those things that for so many people, maybe especially isn't the right word. It's just my perception, so I could be wrong. But I feel like there is a tendency with people who are doing super artsy creative work to want to have total creative control, even when they're working with other people. And yet, as you say, we're all limited in what we can imagine ourselves. And so if somebody else comes in with another idea, you don't want to be so closed off to it that you say no to something that could be absolutely spectacular. Yeah. Not only because you want the best possible thing, but also because you don't want to be a complete control freak about it and, turn off the other people that you're working with. And I get the sense that, a lot of people don't think of it that way, that they think of it as, no, this is my thing, and like try to hang on so tightly.
Yeah. I mean, doing a graphic novel is in many respects, producing one is like producing a movie. It's a much smaller team, of course. Obviously with a movie, you got an army, or a, TV series, you've got an army. But still, it is a collaborative effort. And part of the process as the writer, creator, and the producer, and basically, I'm the one who writes the checks for my people. But I have to choose the right people. Mm-hmm. And that's on me. And part of being a good producer is being able to recognize and choose people who identify with your vision. And so you can work well together. It looks like you want it to look, or close, and then they do their own thing and you go like, yeah, that's even better than I imagined. That's so awesome. And yeah, people constantly surprise me. And sometimes it's just dumb luck. My letterer, Troy Pateri, who is amazing, I met, must have been 8-9 years ago now. And literally we had I'm not even sure. We started out as an online web comic. And in fact, the first 6 issues are online for free. You can read them. Anyone can read them. But I had postcards made. Do I still have them? I still have a few. This is scary. Postcards. Not that your viewers can see them. But a friend of mine who I met in one of my sequential art classes was vending at a conference. And she says, okay, you can have a little bit of part of my table, this little square, because I'm going to be selling. I said, okay. So I stood over there and just handed out. I said, oh, we're a new webcomic. Come check out whatever. She goes, oh, this is Troy. He's a letterer. He likes doing indie comics. He might want to do your comic. So he says, oh, let me see a script. And she had told me to bring that with me. So I did. And he leafed through it and he goes like, yeah, I'll do it. Turns out, Troy, has been with Top Cow forever. He's like one of the best. He's absolutely one of the best. And when I saw what he did, and then I looked at other lettering that was less professional, it really hit me how you could have the greatest story and the greatest artist, but if your lettering sucked, it would kill your comic. Would kill it. And because of my relationship with my friend, I got introduced to Troy. Troy has been with me ever since. And I'd be hard pressed to be convinced to use anyone else. So, that's another issue because I have to work in his very busy schedule too to try to get things done. But I mean, he's definitely worth it. But that's part of the education process for, learning how to produce a graphic novel. And you have to choose good people. And how you choose good people, I'm not even really sure how you can teach that.
Yeah.
Other than, you look at people's work and how it matches up to your ideals, and you almost hope in the beginning, you just cross your fingers and hope for the best. But yeah, fortunately I seem to be pretty good at choosing good, team members. So, yay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the idea of leaving room to be surprised. And I also, it has not escaped me that you have quite a few women working on your team, which I'm not sure is all that common, though it certainly should be, because there are plenty of women who, are funny, can write action, like action movies, read comics, the whole thing. But I don't know if it's just how that worked out or if that was a deliberate choice. But
it's a deliberate choice. I decided when we started all this that since, I'm the one, writing the metaphorical checks. No one writes checks anymore. I know that. That I'm going to have as many all female members of the team as possible. Troy being the exception because he's just been with me for so long. Even the vast majority of the people I hire for to do pinups for our Kickstarters are women and or people of color. I just make a point of doing that because often, like you said, women and people of color are often ignored in a very white male dominated industry. And, I know I'm a very, 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 very tiny pea in the pod of all of this, but, I can make a little difference. So where I can make a difference, I do.
Absolutely. Have you encountered pushback because of that at all? Or is that the kind of thing that, tends to go under the radar because people are just reading the comic and not really paying attention to who's doing what behind the scenes?
The women notice that. Yeah, the women notice. The guys, I don't think they care one way or the other, but the women definitely notice. And I particularly when I'm at cons and they see me behind the table, and I've had women bring their daughters over and introduce me, and I explain who I am, and this is my business, and this is all of mine. And guess what? You can too. You learn the skills. You can do this too, which is always interesting.
It must be
and
great.
I love doing that. Yeah. I don't think the guys. The guys, they look at the art and the story, and I'm sure some of them. Yeah, I'm sure some of them notice, but they just haven't said anything. But just anecdotally, it's the women who actually make a comment or ask or something like that. So
that makes sense to me. Just like I noticed that they would notice, because you're not used to seeing other women doing that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm not sure it just registers with guys as much because they're used to seeing, what they're used to seeing most of the time as a guy. But if it's not, does it register in the same way? I doubt it.
Yeah, probably not. There are a lot more women creatives at conventions now than there were when I first started. I remember it was probably 7 years ago. I'd be at Long Beach Comic-Con or Expo. And I do remember looking down the artist alley, just my aisle. Every table was a white male, except for me at one end. And then there was an African-American gentleman at the far end. And that was it for just my aisle. Now you will see a lot more diversity. A lot more.
And you said that was only 7 years ago?
Yeah.
That's a huge shift in 7 years.
It's a pretty huge shift. And I think conventions are paying attention. I know San Diego Comic-Con is, that they are really searching out for diversity. And because women buy comics.
Yeah.
People of color buy comics. Everybody buys comics of every different shade and everything.
Yeah. And yet it's still such a thing that is associated with particularly teenage white guys.
Yeah.
Even though that's just not the truth of it at all.
Yeah.
The same thing with, science fiction TV viewership. It's all over the place, but the image is the teenage geek alone in his bedroom.
Yeah. It's like, I remember when the X-Files was first on. I loved the X-Files. I watched it every week. And yes, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, this is pre-streaming. But it used to be interesting because the only other people I knew who watched X-Files were other women like myself. And then later on, I would meet guys who would say like, oh, and then there'd be these ridiculous articles like, oh, only women didn't watch the X-Files. I said, what? No. I mean, the character of Dana Scully literally influenced a whole generation of young women to become doctors and FBI agents and scientists. I mean, she is an icon. I think for millennials? I think. I'm not sure. Or Gen Xers? I don't remember. I confuse all the different.
Probably some of each.
a little bit of each. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet those images are so hard to budge. It's such a shame, but I'm glad that it's changing in visible places like at cons. And certainly, I mean,
it is.
I've only been to a handful of Doctor Who cons, but there's a wide variety there, especially, I want to say especially women, and that's probably not true. It's probably, much wider than that even. But I think I tend to notice the women more because I was so used to growing up, with Doctor Who fandom being me and two friends of mine. And the image that was outside of that was, guys in their parents' basements who were watching this show on, Saturday nights at 11 o'clock on PBS. So It's great to go and just be like, I'm not alone. And actually, the first big con that I went to, I was really thrilled to notice, there were women dressed as the Doctor and there were guys who were dressed as female companions. And I was just like, this is amazing. More of this, please. Yeah. No, yeah, you see a lot of that. Cons are really nice. They've gotten a lot better with diversity over the years. And I can't imagine it being any other way at this point. I think it'd just be boring otherwise. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen, Doctor Who Star Wars crossovers, the R2-D2 Time Lord, I mean, so it's a hodgepodge of whatever you want to mash up, whatever way you want to mash it up. And, if I had seen probably outside of that context, the one that I really remember was, this tall guy with the long red wig dressed as Donna Noble, who was Catherine Tate on the show. And I thought, wow, how much grief would you take for that outside of a place like this? And yet it's so great that you can have somebody say, you know what? I think Donna's awesome. I'm going as Donna. And so what? And do that and not have that kind of pushback and challenge that is so outdated. Yeah. That's true. But yeah, it's a ton of fun to see all the different mashups and the creativity in the cosplay. I'll be going to Gaslight Expo at the end of September, early first weekend of October. It's a steampunk convention in San Diego. They've obviously been canceled the past few years because of COVID. And I think everyone's going to show up to that one. They can't wait. But the costumes oh my God. I don't know if you've seen steampunk, the detail in many steampunk costumes, but it's just amazing. And I'm so impressed by the skill of many of these tailors and seamstresses and that put together these costumes. And they look great. I hate dressing up myself. I love to see it on other people and I admire it greatly. But I can tell you it's really hard to work 10 hours wearing a corset. Yeah. And I've done that and I don't particularly care for it. I don't blame you. Being able to move and breathe are kind of important. I will say a corset gives you great posture. Yes. Great posture. You don't have a choice. That is correct. You absolutely do not have a choice. And I'm always doing something wrong with the costume. And one of the other, usually one of the makers who has a booth there they just like get very frustrated with me and come over and like fix me. And I go, thank you, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm a writer. I can do business and marketing, but the costume side, not so much. Yeah. But yeah, you're right, because the steampunk costumes are so much more intricate than a lot of the other fandom costumes are. Yeah. And they are super impressive. I mean, you do feel like you've entered a completely different world in a way that you don't with some of the other things. Yeah. That's absolutely true. And usually at the steampunk conventions, they do want to have some sort of theme. And so everyone tries to get in the theme. And I think the one for Gaslight is
Paris, like the Paris Expo. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing, Eiffel Towers on people's hats, or Eiffel Tower hats that blink and spin and do all sorts of wonderful things. And, fabric that has, Paris type motifs on them from scenery. And yeah, I know some of the makers who design and make these dresses, and I'm like, oh my God, they're just amazing.
Yeah. And it occurs to me, we probably should explain exactly what steampunk is for anybody who's listening who isn't familiar with it. Do you have a good definition?
I guess roughly you can think of it as Victorian science fiction, where steam technology is primarily steam driven, but that can be played with a little bit because it is a subgenre of science fiction, and you can do cross genres with that. I mean, Boston Metaphysical it's often been described to me as more steampunk-ish, which in fact that's what it is. It's what I do is more alternate history with a steampunk twist and paranormal elements. And so, yeah, you'll see a lot of cross genre between steampunk and paranormal. You see that in all of Gail Carriger's Parasol Protectorate. Just beautiful world building romance of, Victorian London, but with werewolves and vampires and all sorts of cool stuff. She does a marvelous job. Others take, like Shelley Adina does a little more grounded approach in her Magnificent Devices series, and which are absolutely charming. Those start in London and do end up in the United States and the West. I think she moves around. I haven't read all of them. There's like 12 of them. So yeah, haven't gotten to all of them. But there's always a chicken in it because she has pet chickens. So yeah, I interviewed her once. She's a lovely woman, and actually had dinner with her a few years back. And I said in the interview, I said, your stories are so much fun. You have such a great lead character, but what's the deal with the chickens? And then to find out that in fact she has a whole flock of pet chickens. And so that's why you get this really interesting, emotional connection to the chickens in her story, because she has an emotional connection to her own chickens.
Yeah. Why not use it?
Yeah.
But I do feel like steampunk is so incredibly flexible. And I think that's a big part of the magic of it, that you can bring in, just about anything else you want with it and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, you see a lot more multicultural steampunk now, which is to me more interesting than your standard set in Victorian England. That actually doesn't interest me that much, that the standard set in Victorian England, because it's just been done so much. Mm-hmm. But you have Everfair. Was Everfair by Nisi? Oh, sorry. It's a Sunday morning brain lapse. Yeah, of course, my brain has just completely shut down on all the names. I should have made a list of them. But yes, there are quite a number of multicultural steampunk out there. I'll try to remember to send you a list.
Okay.
Yeah, I woke up with a sinus headache this morning, so that part of my brain just is not functioning right now.
That's all right. We can always put it in the show notes. It's not a problem. Yeah. So since you've mentioned Kickstarter a couple of times, I wanted to ask you what your experience is as the person who's running a Kickstarter. Like, I get the impression you've done a couple of them. So I'm wondering what all you've done it for and how it's worked out. And
yeah, I've run 9 Kickstarter campaigns. I've actually written a book called Kickstarter for the Independent Creator, to help newbies get a grasp of how to structure the campaign. from pre-launch to launch to fulfillment. I will say the very first campaign, we failed, like a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
But we learned a lot. And I say we, and I include my husband in this, even though he doesn't run the actual campaign. He has to deal with me during the campaign. So we is very accurate. It's a second full-time job, which, that falls into the whole time management thing, to run one. And I do not recommend it for the faint of heart. One of the best stories I can tell about that is I had a few years ago, a gentleman came to my table at I think it was WonderCon, and he bought the book, the Kickstarter for Independent Creator, from me. He came back it was a Friday night, he came back Saturday, walks up to my table, he goes, "I read your book." He says, "I will never run a Kickstarter campaign." And I looked at him and I said, "That was the best $10 you ever spent. Because now you know what is required of you to run a successful campaign. And if you aren't willing to do that, which there's nothing wrong with that, not everyone, it's not for everyone. If you can get self-fund or get funds elsewhere, great, go do that. But the amount of time and emotional energy and stress that goes into running one, that if once you learn that, okay, this is just not for me, that's good information to have.
Sure.
And then you can figure out your plan B or C or however you want to fund your project, or just put away money a little bit every month for your artist or whoever until you can, you can self-fund. I mean, we self-funded the comic for the first 3 issues, so people could see that we were for real. And after the first Kickstarter failed, and one of the many reasons it failed is we had done the first 3 issues, 6-issue miniseries. We were going to, it was like for $25,000 to finish production of the entire thing and produce a beautiful trade paperback. Obviously that didn't work out, but we got over 200 backers, and I think it was like $7,000 or $8,000. So we said, okay, historically, we know we can get this amount of money. What can we do with that? So instead, what we did was we broke it down into smaller bits and did a print run for the 3rd and the 4th. And then we did a production, and then built on that and built it little by little by little. Obviously, it took longer, but we were able to get it done and not have to outlay our own money for it. Our last Kickstarter was the best we've ever run. We had 998 backers and made over $36,000. I didn't really expect that. I mean, I always want to be, do a little bit better each one, but this one just kind of went crazy, and which is wonderful. So yeah, but it takes time to build up to that point and to build the reputation of delivering all of your Kickstarter rewards relatively on time. Yeah, we're pushed out a little bit here. We'll be about a month or month and a half late for people getting, but that's not too bad in the scheme of things. And I keep them well informed. That's another thing. You do have to keep your backers well informed of where everything's at and what's going on. But yeah, it is, like I said, it is a second full-time job. You need to prepare for that. And we used to pre-make dinners ahead of time for the 30 days. So they would just throw it in. We don't have to do that so much anymore because I've done so many of them that it's okay, I start about 3 months ahead of time prepping for the Kickstarter. So I just do a little bit every week. And start, and so everything is ready to go and to launch. And obviously the time commitment becomes more and more as you get closer and closer and closer to that. But yeah, I mean, I've already started promoting it, and I have postcards and a landing page that people can, in fact, I can probably send you that as well. Well, actually, when this runs, the campaign will already be going. So I will send you the link.
Please do.
To the campaign when we launch. But yeah, the audio drama is going to be interesting because we have no historical data for that, unlike the graphic novel. But I'm fairly confident that we'll fund. I have no idea how well we'll do. Not a clue, because I have no data. So this is going to be interesting.
All right. Every once in a while, it's good, I think, to just go do something uncharted and see what happens with it.
Yeah, well, it's breaking into a new market, but that new market that is interested in audio drama will then probably go, wait a minute, there are graphic novels to this? Wait a minute, there's a novel? Wait a minute, what else can I buy? And that's part of it. It's very classic transmedia marketing propagation. If you haven't told, I used to be a marketing director in another life. So yeah.
No doubt that is super helpful.
Yeah, it is helpful. It's still time consuming and exhausting though.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Because, ideally, anyone who's writing something, designing something, creating something would really prefer to be spending all of their time working on that and not having to deal with the part where if you want to make any money from it or get it into the world, even for free, you got to do some stuff to make that happen. It doesn't just happen by magic. Oh,
yeah. I mean, I remember our first website I created and it looked, oh my God, it was so awful. It just looked terrible, but it's the best I could do because I couldn't afford anyone. And it was just from a template from the website. And this was like 8-9 years ago now. So, those templates look pretty crappy back then. And then my ISP provider talked to him and we worked out a deal and he redesigned it. It definitely needs to be redesigned again because I think the website's about ready to implode. But that's another task is on the back burner.
Yep. Yeah, because if you don't make that time to do the creative part, then you'll not only lose your own motivation and your energy to keep going, but you won't have anything for all of those things to put out.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I've already had this discussion with my husband. It's like, okay, I need to, we don't know how the audio drama is going to do, and that's fine. It's going to do what it's going to do, but I'm going to have to start cutting away time to start fleshing out the outline for the new graphic novel. Gwen, I believe, is already on board because I said, oh, we're going to be doing XYZ. And she's like, oh, yay. So I assume that's a yes. But she's exhausted. She's got a 1-year-old at home.
That'll do it right there.
Yeah. I've written the first novel in a trilogy that's a prequel novel series. And I want to get back to write the next two, which I haven't had time to do. And, the nice thing is that, I've had people say like, hey, I really like you to write this thing for me. And, they're going to pay me and that's great. But it's like carving out that time is a problem.
Yeah.
So, I'm flattered, but yeah.
Yeah. So you have the comics, the novel, graphic novel, and now there's going to be an audio drama. Where do you think, do you have plans beyond that? I mean, because part of me says, good grief, that's plenty right there. But hey, I don't know, TV series, movie, I don't know what you might have in mind.
Yeah, I mean, obviously movie, TV series would be awesome. It's finding the right partner. And I'm willing to wait for that, for all of that to come into sync. I'm not in any hurry to, because if I'm going to do it if it's going to go out into the world as a TV series or a movie or something, I want it to be good. So I want to make sure all of the team that's in place is, fully committed, loves the project, and so we can all go forward and be successful. So yeah, I would say 10 years ago, I'd be much more like, oh, I must get it, get it into the movies and get it to this and do this, do that. And now I'm like, whatever. Obviously that's being a little flippant. No, obviously I would love it, but yeah, I'd rather wait for the right partners to come along so everyone is successful. As with everyone I work with and I hire, I always want to set them up for success. I mean, that's always, I'm happy to say probably almost everyone who has worked for me has gone on to bigger and better. And a lot of that has to do with the promotion I do for Boston Metaphysical. So people see their work and how wonderful they are and how good they are. So they snatch them away. Hopefully they won't snatch Gwen away anytime soon. But yeah, she gets offered jobs right and left now because she just does marvelous work. But I think she's going to stay on board because we have a great working relationship and we're both having fun. So
I feel like that is so key. And the fact that you can watch these people go on to bigger and better things is like the best bonus in the world. But I also feel like you're seeding that just by the fact that you are trying to set them up to succeed in the first place and then having fun with it. I feel like this is a Venn diagram that overlaps very nicely in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be out in the business world, work with people you enjoy working with. Life is too short, not to. And, it's not worth putting up with the nonsense. Just like you got to cut the nonsense out and move on.
Yeah, I think that's a great philosophy for many, many things in life.
Many, many things.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I feel like we're probably at a great place to stop, but I also feel like I should check and make sure there isn't anything we missed.
Let's see. We've got, we talked about the audio drama, which I know when this is aired will be live on Kickstarter. It is called Boston Metaphysical Society, The Ghost Ship. It brings back Samuel. It's set in the earlier time period. As the series has grown, I've added additional characters, but this one focuses on Samuel, Caitlin, and Granville. That was a budget decision to put it, just to try. I mean, we have a full cast. We have like 12 different characters, and it'll have sound effects and music. We're going to get a really cool flash drive that a reward tier that people can check out. We will have a CD. If people want that, because Gwen has already done the cover art, which looks amazing. The story itself is about the team of Samuel, Granville, and Caitlin. Ghost ship sails in to Boston Harbor, and the innocents start dying. So they got to figure out what's going on and stop it before it gets worse.
Sounds good.
I do want to recognize the team on that. I was very fortunate, and actually I have to blame it on her, Eddie Louise Clark. Always have to blame it on Eddie.
People may have heard on this podcast just recently. Yeah.
Yes, just recently. We met, I think, through Clockwork Alchemy, which is a small steampunk convention in Northern California. and her husband, Chip. They have run, it's currently up there right now, an audio drama called Sage and Savant. It was on for 4 years. She and I hung out at the Nebula conference a few years back, and she just looked at me. She goes, "You have to do an audio drama. You have to. Like, okay, but I don't know how. And so her husband, Chip, is a composer, audio director. So I hired them, and they are my production team. Eddie is my script editor and also mentor in teaching me how this whole business works. And Chip is not only the audio director, he was the director for the actors. I've been shadowing him. I would love to direct eventually, but I'd probably have to get another season under my belt to shadow him to be effective, because he's very, very good at it. And so, yeah, that's, that thing I was talking about picking the right team. Yeah. So yeah, I hired them, brought them on board, and they have just been amazing. But yeah, I've handled all of the producing side of managing the actors, auditions, paperwork, contracts. All of that is on me. But yeah, I wanted to give them a shout out because they've just been so wonderful and so helpful in getting this done. So I think the way Chip is going, probably by the time the Kickstarter is running, I know the voices for all 8 episodes will be done, and I think all the sound effects will be done. So, because it's an 8 episode series, about a half hour each episode, give or take a minute or two. And so the last thing that'll be left to do is the music. So I do anticipate that everything will be done by January of 2022 for, to be shipped out. But we are on track for that. So
you're definitely in good hands with Eddie and Chip.
Yeah, they're just marvelous and so easy to work with, and have educated me a lot. So that's been great.
I bet. Well, I will look forward to that and following the journey from Kickstarter to January and seeing where everything ends up.
Great. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for coming. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. That's our show for this week. Thanks so much to Madeleine Holly-Rosing for joining me, and to you for listening. If this episode inspired you, please do subscribe and leave a review. They make such a big difference. Thanks. You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.